Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. The world's changing really, really fast, isn't it? Today we're going to primarily analyse some of the speeches and moments from yesterday's Charlie Kirk memorial. Thanks, Tim Cast, for the raid. But really what I'm interested in is what feels like a radical revival of our entire... Well, I don't mean a revival of our culture, a new set of values. They're not even new values. Things are changing so quickly that it's impacted my grammar. Get Rumble Premium if you want it. If you're watching us anywhere other than Rumble right now, come and join us on Rumble. We're going to first of all look at, I suppose, the strongest evidence that something significant is happening is that Charlie Kirk's memorial is being attended by the most important political and media figures of contemporary US culture, I would say. Would you? That's one. If someone had told you prior to Charlie Kirk's murder that his memorial would be an enormous stadium filling event, would you have been surprised by that? I reckon I would have been surprised. That's just on the sort of material plane. But then I've not watched Erika Kirk's speech yet, and my understanding is that she's forgiven the young man, and I'd like to start there because everything is changing so quickly. I think we must focus on the eternal. Remember, eternity is not a really long temporal duration. Eternity is the quality of timelessness, and you know it in yourself. You know when you are graced by eternity, you probably feel it mostly as love, I reckon. Let me know in the comments and chat if you agree with that. But when someone is able to forgive the killer of someone very, very close to them under such difficult circumstances, then you know that they are embracing in eternity. And have a look at the Rumble comments right now, and you'll see that some people are even in this moment sort of just caught in pirouettes of demonic idiocy. What I mean by pirouette of demonic idiocy in this instance is just sort of spamming. It's extraordinary. Let's focus on the eternal. And you need help, and it's available.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men just like the one who took his life. That young man, on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
When people are frightened, and I understand that a lot of people are, about the prospect of what they would term Christian nationalism, I think that's the term that I've heard used a lot prior to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. People would talk a lot about the Christian right. And when I was a person that was a member of different cultural groups and had a kind of different profession, different income, different life entirely, what I thought Christian right might mean is using the teachings of Christ to underwrite bigotry and exclusivity. But even if such a thing exists, the message of Christ is all-powerful. And even if there is such a thing of using Christ's teaching, message, and sacrifice to legitimize a particular political perspective and to govern and legislate and control in a particular way, even if that does exist, even if that's not imaginary, not just a phantom. When Erika Kirk, within just over a week after her husband's murder, has the recourse and the instruction and the guidance and the fortitude that faith provides, and is able to say publicly, I forgive my husband's killer, that shows you there's a deep power in Christianity, but also there is a doctrine that even if people were to try to use Christianity manipulatively, people say, oh, you became a Christian because you've been accused of all these terrible things. But Christ is real. Christ is real, actually real, and here now and present now. And it is that truth and that reality that provides protection for everyone, even those that most fear ideas like Christian nationalism. The nations are a drop in the bucket. Nations come and go. Flags fade. Rulers die. The King of eternity and the sacrifice that was made that you may participate in eternity is the promise and covenant that you need if you find yourself speaking unexpectedly in the mad tangle and tidal waves of grief after the murder of your husband. I would imagine, like anyone who's grieving an unexpected death, Erika Kirk's going to have a very long and challenging journey ahead of her. We've all got long and challenging journeys ahead of us, haven't we? But she'll be making that journey hand in hand with Christ. It's a powerful, powerful message. So, for all of the people that are concerned that Charlie Kirk's death and the subsequent phenomenology or phenomenon, the phenomena that have followed Charlie Kirk's death, the way that it's become portrayed in media, the way that it's created certain commentary and certain positions and stances, the fact that Trump is there and Trump speaks at this memorial, we'll look at that in a moment, and whatever people might utilize it for. And any event that happens these days gets used by someone. I mean, look, doesn't free market capitalism kind of demand that? Doesn't it demand that if there's a kind of a train wreck, that people capitalize on it? If there's a murder, people to capitalize on it? If there's some kind of toxicity in anything, there's nothing so beautiful or ugly that it can't be exploited in the kind of systems that appear to abide these days. But I feel that this is a powerful time of fracture, fissure, and change and radical change. I don't know what's happening anymore. But fortunately I don't need to know. None of us are that important. None of us are that important. But all of us are really, really important as well. Okay, let's have a look at firstly, having seen this beautiful example of forgiveness from a grieving widow under extraordinary pressure, let's have a look at some of the other moments from Charlie Kirk's memorial and look at how that's likely to feed into a culture that's still alive, burning with conflict. Some people appearing to think that the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel is more significant than the murder of Charlie Kirk. And in a way, from their perspective, of course, they're right, because the murder of Charlie Kirk in the culture is an object, and the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel is an object. So the fact that one of those objects has a real murder in it and one of them is just about a TV show and a kind of evidence of a culture changing direction, that's kind of irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Let's have a look at all of it and see if we can see what we can glean from this together.
His opponents, he wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erika. But now Erika can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent. Charlie's angry. Looking down, he's angry at me now. He wasn't interested in demonizing anyone. He was interested in persuading everyone to the ideas and...
Now, well, this is Trump. He's a person that's incapable of being inauthentic, I would say, even though, of course, his detractors think of him primarily as a deceiver. I think that's just another example of him being honest and authentic, and I reckon a lot of people are not thinking, yeah, we must forgive and be loving to Charlie Kirk's killer, or even people that post stuff that's disrespectful. Now, at this moment is Tucker Carlson, who compares Charlie Kirk to Christ, and in a way that might seem hyperbolic, I've not watched it yet, or grandiose, but in a way all Christians are called to model ourselves on Christ and to identify his attributes, recognize the impossibility of achieving that standard without grace, and yet walking towards it. Let's see what Tucker Carlson says.
Ultimately, he was a Christian evangelist. And it actually reminds me of my favorite story ever. So it's about 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, and Jesus shows up and he starts talking about the people in power, and he starts doing the worst thing that you can do, which is telling the truth about people, and they hate it, and they just go bonkers. They hate it, and they become obsessed with making him stop. This guy's got to stop talking. We've got to shut this guy up. And I can just sort of picture the scene in a lamplit room with a bunch of guys sitting around eating hummus, thinking about what do we do about...
Interesting detail, the hummus. Very Tucker Carlson to add what the snacks are in that scenario. And of course, the execution of Christ was a political act, but also necessary in the realms of divinity that most of us are aware of and feel and intuit and sometimes even receive, but can't comprehend because it's beyond the rational and reasonable mind. And if there is a revival happening right now, what we're being invited to do is access and appreciate that what we've been living in up to now, both individually and collectively, is broken and cannot work for us. Whether you're, as we'll see later, Mark Ruffalo, outraged by Jimmy Kimmel's cancellation, or if you're Donald Trump, unable to resist the urge to be bombastic about your political opponents. And remember, Donald Trump's got a very particular gig. He's president of the United States of America. Oppositionism necessary. Look at the culture that he lives in. Mark Ruffalo, still probably a deeply idealistic person. I'm not saying idealistic as in naive. People think that all the time that I'm naive. Like if I have a chat with the lad Nick Fuentes, oh, it's naive. It's naive of you. Man, I don't know. I don't feel very naive. I've seen things now. I've seen things. I've been through things now. I've had a lot of naivety wrung out of me. I'm not claiming to be smart, but I don't think I'm naive anymore. But what I feel is that if you're looking at the events of today from a political perspective, you are going to miss what's really happening. We are witnessing the end of a particular paradigm. It's a shift. From that perspective, Charlie Kirk's death is more than Charlie Kirk's death. Charlie Kirk's, like when you think of, here's a good example probably, the death of Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo. So like we weren't all like, oh no, what are we going to do with Archduke Ferdinand? I loved that guy. Yeah, his murder is happens at a point when Germany has just industrialized its war machine and colonialism is beginning to creak and falter. And we have the First World War and the Second World War, and many historians would say that those wars are the same war, essentially, with a brief intermission. And we have the 20th century clash of ideologies, the fascism and the communism, the two ideologies that are born of industrialization. Now we're going to see the birth of the philosophies and theologies born of mass communication through total technology, through immersive and ubiquitous technology, the kind of technology you're watching right now. And the reason that Charlie Kirk's death is ultimately significant is, in a sense, I pray he's a Christian martyr. I pray that's true. But culturally, what's happened is the first lightning rod of a new form of communication has been assassinated politically. For what reason and by whom, we still don't entirely understand. And certainly there does seem to be a good degree of utility when diagnosing the killer. Some people, this guy was a trans activist. Some people have more complex views on the murder. But I think that even that pales into insignificance when you look at the spiritual world, when you consider, as best as we can within our limitations, what might be meant by do not conform to the patterns of this world, what might be meant by my ways are not your ways. Let's continue with Tucker Carlson's eulogy.
Do about this guy telling the truth about us. We must make him stop talking. And there's always one guy with the bright idea, and I can just hear him say, I've got an idea, why don't we just kill him? That'll shut him up. That'll fix the problem. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Everything is inverted.
Yeah. So that's, I would... that's one aspect of the murder of Christ and of Charlie Kirk, political expedience. Let's see what Secretary Kennedy says about it.
And Charlie understood the great paradox that it's only by surrender to God that God's power can flow into our lives and make us effective human beings. Christ died at 33 years old, but he changed the trajectory of history. Charlie died at 31 years old, but because he had surrendered, he also now has changed the trajectory of history.
Yeah, I suppose that all of us that are in Christ potentially may serve him in such a manner. Let's have a look at J.D. Vance.
A little uncomfortable talking about my faith in public as much as I loved the Lord and as much as it was an important part of my life. I have talked more about Jesus Christ in the past 2 weeks than I have my entire time in public life. And that is an undeniable legacy of the great Charlie Kirk. You know, he loved God. And because he loved God, he wanted to understand God's creation and the men and women made in his image. Now, much has been said over the last week about Charlie's ability to approach any topic.
That's pretty beautiful. I think that's pretty beautiful and precisely what's required. Steve Bannon refers to it as a muscular Christianity. I've not seen that yet. Let's see what. Let's have a look at that. I suppose what I'm encouraged by is if you, like me, feel that no political or material ideology is likely to deliver anything but further conflict and further exploitation, you might be heartened by the reemergence of the principles of the Holy One. Some people will, of course, be concerned that Christianity can be exploited and might even argue has been exploited pretty much since its inception, certainly since it was adopted as the state religion of the Roman Empire. But part of faith, as some of the speakers at Charlie Kirk's memorial alluded to, is recognizing your individual fallibility, and it's only in him that there is any grace and power, but that you are a participant potentially in his grace by surrender and repentance, as has also been mentioned there. Let's have a look at Steve Bannon talking about muscular Christianity, and I suppose my encouragement comes from where's authority coming from, if not from God? If authority is derived from reason, I have noticed, and I wonder if you have, that reason divorced from divine authority tends towards selfishness and exploitation. Have you noticed, for example, lately, that political sides appear to alter their position on, thanks Crowder, we're just talking about Charlie Kirk Kirk's memorial, if you're joining us from Mug Club. And have you noticed the tendency of political parties to alter their position on, for example, something like free speech or political violence or war, depending on whether or not they're in power? And that makes me feel that it's not a principle at all. It's just utility. But that ain't the case when it comes to Christ and Christianity. If someone is purporting to govern from a Christian perspective, then you've got the artifacts in front of you with which to take them on. The Bible. If someone says, well, this is what we're running this country as a Christian nation, well, then we can, hey, Ellie Upton, hello, all of you joining us from Mug Club. If you're purporting to run a nation or your family or your own moral and spiritual life as a Christian, then there's pretty clear guidance on what you're supposed to be doing and what you're not supposed to be doing. Let's have a look at Bannon here, talking about muscular Christianity. And I wonder if any adjective in front of Christianity potentially is a problem, because it's all contained within the word.
The whole service was muscular Christianity. This is why I put out the New York Times and MSNBC are going to lead tomorrow, because they're melting down. Muscular, a form of muscular Christianity, Christian nationalism, was put forward here in the memorial service for a slain American martyr. Yeah, right? And they're going to freak out because you had the director of national intelligence, you had the head of the personnel office in the president, secretary of war, secretary of state, vice president of the United States, president of the United States. And not just Charlie's team and the widow. I mean, the most powerful people in the United States government, in the world. And we've never had this, even in the 19th century.
So is this going to be a period of radical change? And I would say this, even when it comes to something that one might regard objectively, or hope to regard objectively at least, like Charlie Kirk's murder, there will be many, many appraisals and perspectives and attempts to exploit and utilize the death politically, financially, and even in terms of something like muscular Christianity. But we will know the presence of Christ, because what we will feel will be peace. We will feel peace. If you're not feeling peace, then it's not Jesus. If you're watching this on YouTube or X or anywhere else, eventually you're going to have to make your way over to Rumble. So click the link in description and join us there. We're going to, in a minute, we're going to have a little commercial. But first, I want to have a look at Don Jr. doing an impression of his own father. Let's have a look at that. Although Don Jr. sounds a lot like Donald Trump anyway, so it's not a long, is that a hard impression?
Who's seen me on social media knows I'm far more likely to crack a joke or get myself in trouble for posting some grossly inappropriate memes than I am to shed a tear. I know this because I've even gotten the call from that guy a couple times. Don, you're getting a little aggressive on social media, Don. Relax. But last week...
Well, there you go, a little light-hearted relief amidst a time of tumult. Let's have a look at, we'll just have a quick message from one of our partners. We'll be back in a minute. What makes Balance of Nature unique? So many things. Let me count the ways. They're supplements that are the result of years of research and are manufactured under current good manufacturing practices with regular third-party lab testing. They never add sugar or anything artificial. Any sugars occur naturally. How many more times?
Hey, Russell, are there phytonutrients in those?
Phytonutrients? If that's what you want, these are the phytonutrients for you. Balance of Nature delivers the phytonutrients that naturally occur in 47 whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. Their fruits and veggie supplements include 31 colourful ingredients like mango, pineapple. We've got phytonutrients coming out of our wazoo, which some people say is dangerous. Phytonutrients, and as I said, all these vegetables and stuff, I can't emphasise the success of this product. 4 whole fibres, psyllium husk, flaxseed, monk fruit, apples, plus, by the way, 12 aromatic spices such as cinnamon, turmeric, and cardamom. 1 for each disciple. You gotta get them! Take them with water, chew them, mix them into food or drink. Balance of Nature supplements are vegan, kosher, right, Isaac? Gluten-free. They've got it all. If you're taking balance of nature, the easiest way to stay consistent is by becoming a preferred customer. That means, that's right, recurrent income. Sign up to it so you don't even get to think. That stuff's coming to your door, whether you like it or not. Your supplements show up automatically every 28 days. Just try cancelling this stuff. You can't. You'll be buying this when you're long dead, like a voter in Chicago. No reordering, no running out, no hassle. The best part, preferred customers always get the lowest price we offer, plus free shipping every single month. It just shows up your door right when you need it. Oh, hello, you. So if you're ready to save money, stick to your routine, and take the guesswork out of it, becoming a preferred customer is the best way to go. Sign up with the code Russell. That's my name, 2 S's, 2 L's. Go to www.balanceofnature.com and sign up as a new preferred customer with code Russell to get 35% off your first order, plus free fiber and spice supplement. For God's sake, hurry. This offer's only available while supplies last. That's true of all offers, of course. Once you're out of supplies, you can't... I mean, where would you get it? Now, back to the content. Jimmy Kimmel has been cancelled. You'll have heard a lot of people talking about that. How many of those people will have been on Jimmy Kimmel? Have a son that has tetralogy of fallow, like Jimmy Kimmel's son. How many of those people will have worked inside of Hollywood and understand Hollywood? How many of those people will be, to a degree, personally affected by the assassination of Charlie Kirk and will know what it's like to have a talk show cancelled? I reckon we're in a pretty small category now. I'm in that category. Let's look at the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel and talk together about what it means in a culture that appears to be exploding and what will emerge out of this explosion. Will it be victory for one side in the culture war, or will it be something entirely new, born in all of this confusion? First of all, let's have a look at what Kamala Harris said. Yes, that's right. That's where we're going to start. Kamala Harris said, is that a still of Kamala Harris? Asset 23. Let's have a look at what Kamala Harris says about Kimmel's suspension. We'll find that in a second. First of all, here's Tim Walz saying we have to get back to decency. I'm assuming that's what that is.
We're talking about this political violence thing. We have got to get back to the decency.
You get up in the morning and you doom scroll through things, and although I will say this, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime, just so you know, there will be news.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? We covered that at the time, thinking that Tim Walz was perhaps irresponsible, or at least it was an ill-judged joke because, you know, with a couple of assassination attempts on Trump. And now, of course, in the meanwhile, Charlie Kirk has been shot and Tim Walz's comments look even more ill-advised. And I suppose the combative component of contemporary rhetoric is what we're sort of trying to address now. That so many people have said so many ferocious and appalling things about one another and about each other's political ideology that it's become normalized, and it's, of course, oozed into real life now. People spend so much of their time, all of us do it, I'm trying to do it less, staring at some screen, escalating the scale and intensity of their invective in order to attract more attention without recognizing that there are real repercussions. Do you remember when your great Carl Sagan said that every single TV broadcast ever made is emanating outward into the infinite even now? Indeed, isn't that the premise of Galaxy Quest, that an extraterrestrial nation encounter the broadcasts of a 1980s Star Trek style TV show and think that it's a kind of reality that they've encountered? They refer to these Star Trek style TV shows as historical documents. In a way, rhetoric ain't real. Tim Walz don't mean it, I don't suppose, when he says, oh, I hope I wake up one day and scroll on my phone and he's dead. And I don't imagine that, did Crowder, and excuse me, not Stephen Crowder, thank you Mug Club for the raid, did Colbert mean it when he was endorsing vaccines? Said he thought about it long and hard when he danced about like that? Did Jimmy Kimmel mean it when he said, if you haven't had the shot, rest in peace, Wheezy, I think is the joke that he made. And I reckon he probably made that joke after he'd been in intensive care with his son. And I know what that's like. I know what that's like to be in intensive care with your young child after heart surgery. So all of us are entering into these sort of ridiculous spaces of rhetoric. People are doing it in the comments now. People are doing it all over X, all over YouTube, like sort of just reaching for the most incendiary and darkest remark that you can sling into the apparent infinite there. Well, it turns out that there are consequences. Those consequences might be that your show gets cancelled, or that might be that you get shot. Flying ears. Charlie Kirk called an African-American customer service agent a moronic black woman. Well, yeah, maybe he did, but does he deserve to get shot? I mean, I've just watched his widow forgiving someone for killing her husband. Without forgiveness, we're all in serious trouble. And indeed, the sort of presumption that everyone's entering into this conversation from a place of presumed perfection, big part of the problem, isn't it? I'm right. All I have to do is make you understand me, and then you will go away and everything will readjust around my perspective. That's not the reality anymore. Let's have a look at the cancellation of his show there and talk about these two artifacts together: the murder of Charlie Kirk, the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, and look at what they tell you as a kind of a yardstick of where the culture's heading. And in conclusion, really, what's fascinating about Charlie Kirk is what's increasingly being revealed is the figure of Christ. And when you look behind Jimmy Kimmel, there's the picture of the state that wants you dependent on it in the same way that you must be dependent on God. The state wants you to depend on it, in some cases financially, through its welfare, and some people require that. There was times in my life when I needed the welfare of the state, and I'm thankful that I received it. But what price are you willing to pay for that dependency if the culture also wants you dependent on it for your ideology, for your beliefs, for your faith? How far are you willing to go in your fealty to this construct, this set of relationships between government agencies that appear to be somehow permanent and abiding, regardless of what happens in elections, commercial interests that appear to be global and able to evade and avoid taxation and restriction? And what is behind it really? Is it possible that there's something far fiercer and darker than just material interests behind the state's demand for absolute power? And I'm not talking about the tyrannies of the last century, your fascisms and communisms, those words that are used to explode and generate more hatred, particularly on the social media streams that seem to be informing and enthusing those that seek to take more violence into the world. I'm talking about the end of those ideas. Those ideas, communism, fascism, they're peeling away now. And what's being revealed? Let's have a look at this. What do I want to look at? This goes straight to this Mark Ruffalo.
If hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going
to. So what is it? Everything's one thing behind. Everything's one thing behind. That is 26 I just pressed, and that was Mark. So everything's one behind. Okay, so that means that he will be 25.
We saw Jimmy Kimmel's show was canceled. We don't know what the reasons are, really. It's very cloudy and murky. I don't understand what's happening right now. My industry doesn't understand what's happening right now. But what they do understand is our freedom of speech is being attacked. I heard Mark Maron today talk about it. He said, you guys were so afraid of being canceled. You went out and you screamed and you yelled about being canceled. But the cancellation was coming from people who didn't like what you had to say. It was coming from people who didn't agree with what you were saying and were speaking out about it. This cancellation is the United States government coming and taking your voice away from you. It is the United States government that...
Did you ever watch Jimmy Kimmel's show? It's like, not that Jimmy Kimmel was like, right, okay, welcome to the Jimmy Kimmel show. Right, what we're going to do now, guys, this is how we're going to organize our communities. This is how we're going to reach the holy divine within us. This is how we're going to organize our food resources. This is how we're going to take our country back from commercial and corporate interests that want us to live in spiritual darkness. It wasn't, was it? It was just like dancing around saying that vaccines were okay, normalizing corporatism and commercialism as a way of life. The Jimmy Kimmel show was meaningless. In fact, you know, when Charlie Kirk died, a couple of days later, Robert Redford died, one of the most admired actors of his age. This is like, you know, Sundance, out of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He was in All the President's Men, a significant movie then about political corruption and the Watergate scandal. Well, Robert Redford's death in these new spaces is kind of, you know, it's a tragedy. He was a sort of beautiful human being, but he was an old man who lived a good life and ultimately died, like we will all die, of course. What I think is really interesting is that the culture's moved. It's over. I noticed this, I think, let me know in the comments and chat if you did, when the last election cycle was taking place and the Democrats marshaled the forces of A-lister actors like Mark Ruffalo and various others. I don't know if he specifically was invited, but I remember seeing on Oprah Winfrey a bunch of real big stars, all of the kind of stars that we all love and admire if we take the culture seriously, or even if we enjoy the culture. You know, I'm not saying the culture is absolutely evil. Just saying it's generated by evil. Anyway, when I watched it, superficially, you would think Trump using podcasters like, you know, Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul, Joe Rogan, and J.D. Vance appearing on Theo Von, mostly sort of white guys, and other than Theo Von, sort of middle-aged white guys, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, middle-aged white American men. And there was this variety of sort of attractive, appealing, glamorous stars endorsing Kamala Harris on Oprah. But actually, that was the antiquated and old institutional systems of media that are falling apart, that can no longer function. The old school. Remember, I used to say a lot that Joe Rogan is the new Oprah Winfrey, a star so bright that he can generate other entities, like, for example, Huberman or Theo Von or all of the people, Jordan Peterson, that emerged out of Joe Rogan's orbit. Oprah Winfrey was like that a couple of decades ago. Dr. Oz, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Dr. Phil, lots of wellness type folk, Gayle King, all sorts of people emerged out of the Oprah sphere. Well, now that media world has collapsed. It's still present and people are still making money out of it, and they're still trying to reboot and remodel out of the ashes of their old and collapsing systems of power. They're trying to see if they can align with what's happening now in independent media. But as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. Old media was centralized and therefore could broker big deals with advertisers and could convey the messaging of a centralized state. New media is independent. And whilst, of course, it's completely possible for it to become captured by ideologies and commercial interests, indeed, many commentators say that independent media, they're all sort of MAGA nationalists. But have you noticed the endless fracturing in that space, that you could have once seen Jordan Peterson, Candace Owens, Dave Rubin, Joe Rogan, all this sort of one centralized entity. That's not the case anymore. There's so much diversity and division and opposition even in that previously unified group. And in one way, that might be disheartening. But in another way, it's important because the medium is the message. And the message is decentralization. You cannot centralize power to the degree you once could and keep the technology we have now free. So you have to legitimize control over this technology. And how do you legitimize control over this technology? You align it with the worst things possible, like pornography. Now, of course, most people use the internet for pornography pretty frequently. I don't. Thanks, Jesus. But there are, even beyond pornography, child pornography, hatred, right? There are things that are disgusting and negative and awful about the technological revolution, but most of those things, I think, are being mobilized and utilized to legitimize the centralization of technology and communication when the tendency is towards decentralization. People worry that decentralization equates to chaos, but that needn't be the case. How would you avoid it? Well, if there was underneath the decentralization a governing ideology, and whose authority would you accept? You might not want to accept the authority of Donald Trump. You might not want to accept the authority of Keir Starmer or Kamala Harris or Justin Trudeau or Macron. You might, in fact, only yield to the authority of God. In fact, whoever's authority you appeal to, ultimately you're saying there is a supreme authority. And you can't, well, you can, but you mustn't, shouldn't, oughtn't quarrel with the authority of the God that died for you, That's what's breaking out of the Charlie Kirk scenario that's fascinating. And as you see Mark Ruffalo there sort of scrambling for the government shut down Jimmy Kimmel, he must know in himself that Jimmy Kimmel was just selling products on late night and was going to get cancelled soon anyway, because all late night TV is going to get cancelled soon anyway, because not enough people are watching it, because they're watching independent media, because it's easier to get stuff that you're actually interested in and is authentic and you like and you can probably trust more on independent media now. On platforms like Rumble, on platforms like X, and, you know, not for long, but even on platforms like YouTube. YouTube will ultimately do deals comparable to the kind of deals that were done on your old school networks. It's already somewhat centralized because it's owned by Alphabet Google, and that's the way that it will go. So we're in an important and interesting moment when it comes to media. As things fall apart and break apart, there will need to be a defining ideology. And if you don't have one, if you've not surrendered to Christ, if you're still trying to work things out with your own mind and your own feelings and a culture that basically wants you to sit like a blob and consume, you are going to fall apart and you are going to collapse into total despair. Everyone will let you down. I'll let you down because I'm just a person and I don't know really what I'm doing. My primary interests are my wife and my children and how I use my faith in God to not mess that up. But, you know, because I've lived in these worlds, man. I've lived in them. I've lived in Hollywood. I've been on Jimmy Kimmel. I've been on all them shows. I've seen them people. Some of them are like really lovely and cool and amazing people. And now I've lived in this world. I've been on Joe Rogan. I've been on Charlie Kirk. I've spoken to Jordan Peterson and Candace Owens and everyone. And this is what I can tell you now, that out of this chaos, you better find something you can rely on. And it can't be a person. And if it's a person, it's the only person that ever lived that was entirely God and entirely human. And you can get that message a variety of places. And Charlie Kirk was one of the people that was trying to convey that message in his own imperfect way, and now he's dead, and people will use that death to expedite political messaging. Of course they will, because that's what the machine demands, but the truth of Christ will be present in it as well, as we saw in that memorial. As the emergence of Christ and perhaps the hastening return of Christ approaches, the culture, which I ultimately think is controlled by evil. I'm not suggesting that Jimmy Kimmel is evil. He's just like a normal person. He's no different than anyone else. But that culture will start to fall apart because its models are collapsing. Let me know if you agree with that in the comments and chat. All you lot on locals like Kazo and the Nerd Far Away. And let me know what you think. Craven1 and Cheryl Lee 41. All my friends on Rumble. Let's have a little look at some more of Mark Ruffalo and understand how even something insignificant like the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, there's an anchor, there's a thread that drops down into a deeper truth. And if you can identify what it is, you will understand the culture better.
Government that is now suppressing the freedom of speech. It is the United States government, not your neighbors, not someone on social media. It is the government doing it now. And that's where we all have to come together. Because authoritarian regimes, fascist regimes have to degrade our freedoms more and more over time until we're living the smallest, the most frightened, the most secretive lives. Think of yourselves living under the Taliban, because that's where we're headed. So, I know it's scary. And I know...
It's weird because it's not that different from what I'm saying, actually, except it feels like he could have said all of those things while Biden was president. He could have said all those things while Obama was president, because if you're claiming that the culture can provide protection from the kind of forces that he's describing and that he attributes to Trump and MAGA nationalist populism, say, then you think that the ultimate power and authority is human power and authority, and it is not. It is not. That's why I suppose they revert to pagan ideas like ecology and climate change and Gaia worship, because they don't believe in the one true God. I'm starting to understand everything now.
No, that there's a lot of doubt. But now is the time for us to find our heroism.
I agree with Mark Ruffalo on that. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. If you're watching us on YouTube, we're leaving you now, and join us over on Rumble. If you don't have Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. It supports a good platform where they're doing their best to showcase free speech, and it supports me directly. Here's a message from one of our partners. See you in a second. Whoever you are, you might consider yourself a businessman or woman or person, or I don't know, maybe you don't have a gender or don't want one. That's not the key issue here, though. The key issue is 1775, a delicious coffee. Let's be honest, most coffee, all it does is it helps you to organize a stool in that inward back pocket you call the butt. What does it also do? It leaves you feeling all down, jittery, foggy, and needing another cup of coffee. You can only trust 1775, the one